Okay, for these notes today, we're just going to start with something simple. We are going to learn how to actually write notes in a proper way. So the first thing you need to do is get your pencil and a blank sheet of paper. You may want to keep this sheet of paper in your notebook so that you can keep all of your notes together. That's not a bad idea. Okay? So the first thing that you need to do is you need to write what we're doing on your paper. So you could write taking notes. That's our title of the notes. Okay. Now, normally, if we were taking notes on a chapter, I would, rather than writing taking notes there, we would write chapter 1, section 1, integers or something like that. And you guys will learn as we go along because I will continue to write the notes as though I was writing them in class. Okay, so after that, taking notes. Okay, the first point about taking notes. 1. Always write clearly. No matter how much space it takes, you're going to want to always write clearly so that you make sure that you can go back and read all of your notes later. Okay? The second thing that you're going to want to do is keep examples separated. So sometimes when I do my examples, I might have a line here like that. Example 1 would go in this box, 2, 3, and 4. Just so that all of your work for each of the examples are in those spots so that then you don't mix the numbers up or anything like that. And another thing number 3, keep lots of space between problems. Now, the reason for that is you're going to have a lot of problems, and when you go back and you want to look at your notes, you're not going to be able to see them clearly if you have them all mushed together. All right. Okay, so we're going to start with Chapter 1, Section 1 to begin with. Again, this is the first time that you're actually taking notes for my class, so make sure that you are understanding how the notes work so that then in the future you are able to write notes better. So we'll start with the title of the notes. Remember, it's Chapter 1, Section 1. I don't really like that. Okay, sorry. So it's going to be Chapter 1, Section 1, so 1.1. And it's called Integers and Absolute Value. So integers and absolute value. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to go over is some things in order to be ready for this section. So we will start with the definition of integers. So integers, they are numbers, just whole, positive, and negative numbers. Now, that includes 0. Okay? So we can write a list of negative numbers. Go ahead and think about what your list of integers would be. So write a list of integers on your paper. Okay, by now you should have some numbers, at least 3 or 4. Okay, so I think last year you guys should have learned about 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, some fractions. You may not have learned as much about negative numbers, but any negative number would be considered an integer. So -5, -4, -3, -2, -1. Those are all integers. So is 0, because we included 0, and 1, 2, blah, blah, blah. All of those numbers would be considered integers. So then think about it. Would -572 Would that be an integer? Yeah, that would be an integer. Okay, in the past you might have learned about some fractions, so if I said 2 1/3, would that number be an integer? Think about it. No. Fractions and decimals are not going to be integers. Again, they have to be whole numbers. Okay? Okay, now let's get on the point, still in Chapter 1, Section 1, let's get on the point of absolute value and what that is. So if we write the word absolute value, we can go ahead and we can write a definition for that. The definition of absolute value is the distance between the number 0 and that number on the number line. Okay, so if we're all familiar with number lines, remember that's your straight line. Sometimes 0 is in the middle, but we're going to find a lot of times if we have to graph a bigger number on the number line, then we're not going to really have 0 on there. So if I put 0 in the middle, remember all of my positive numbers are this way, and this way would be all of my negative numbers. Now, on the positive side, as you go this way, the numbers get bigger. As you go the opposite direction, the numbers get smaller. Okay? So here I go. 1, 2, 3, 4. -1, -2, -3, -4. So if I were to talk about the absolute value of the number -4, I would count how many spots that number is away from 0. So if I were talking about -4, I start at 0 and I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4 spots over, okay? Now, the fact about absolute value is it's always positive. Always going to be positive. You're never going to have a negative absolute value because it's just steps. It's the steps that you take away from that number. So you can never take negative steps. If you are walking around and you had a Fitbit on, you never get negative steps on a Fitbit. It never takes steps away from you, whether you're walking forward or backwards. So no matter what, you're going to get credit for all of the steps that you take. Okay, so let's talk about a couple examples. So, for examples, they might ask you to graph the number on the number line, okay? So, we're going to start with just finding it. So, it says, find the number's absolute value. Okay, so for the first one, it's going to be like the absolute value of the number 7. Okay, absolute value is indicated by these lines. Those lines right there indicate that we need to find the absolute value. Okay, so I'm going to graph it on the number line, although you do not have to. So since the number is 7, I'm going to start down here with the number 8. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and 3. We don't really have to include 0, although it would be nice. So 2, 1, and 0. Okay? Sorry, it's a little bit sloppy. That's why I said you got to have plenty of room for your examples. Okay, so if I start at the number 7, I need to count how many steps I have to take to get from 0 to 7. So start at 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So So is it going to be positive 7 or negative 7? That's right, it's going to be positive 7 because absolute value is always positive. Okay, so let's try another example. Example number 2. Let's find the absolute value of negative 1. Now again, remember, we can draw a number line, and I can go 0, 1, 2, negative 1, negative 2. Okay, so we're going to start at negative 1, and then we're going to find out how many steps it is away from 0. Okay, so it's going to be 1, but since it's negative, would it still be negative down there? The answer is no. It's going to be positive because absolute value is always positive. Okay, let's try a third example. You go ahead and do this one on your own. Absolute value of negative 5. If you finish that one, try this one, number 4. Absolute value of 14. Okay, so the absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5. Good. And the absolute value of 14 is 14. Positive. Always positive. Great job. Okay. All right, since you guys did such a good job, the very last thing I want to try is simplifying an expression, which it seems weird because we're not really into simplifying expressions yet, but it'll say simplify the expression. Oops. Okay, so some of your problems will tell you to simplify the expression. The first couple will look pretty easy because you're finding the absolute value. So for example, if I have one like this that says the absolute value of negative 5,422. Okay, so you guys should easily be able to tell me what that absolute value is, which it is positive 5,422. Good job. Okay. But then we'll also get into some weird ones that will look like this. It will say the opposite of the absolute value of negative 12. Okay, remember that this thing right here, although it's a negative sign, it literally is telling us opposite. That's your keyword, opposite. Okay, so here, what we have to do first is we've got to figure out what's in here. What is the absolute value of negative 12? Okay, so you guys should totally have that down. Absolute value of negative 12 is positive 12, okay? But this guy right here, this opposite guy says, no, I want what's the opposite of positive 12. Well, you guys should know the opposite of positive is going to be negative. So we're going to erase that positive sign, and we're going to make it a negative sign, because that is what this here indicates, okay? I know it seems confusing. We can try it one more time, okay? So if I say I want the opposite of the absolute value of 4, okay? So let's start out with what's the absolute value of 4? The absolute value of 4 is positive 4, okay? That took care of what's inside here. But we have that sign right here that tells me that I need the opposite. So we are going to erase our positive sign, and we're going to make it a negative sign because it asks for the opposite, okay? That's the only time you do that, is when the opposite is out there, okay? All right.